Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming through a feminist lens. Today, I am your host, Matt, and I'm here with my friend Jem.
Hi.
Hello, Jem, and Alex. Hello, Alex. You might be on mute, but we know you're here. Today's topic, we're continuing our run on censorship and the real cancel culture, which is done by governments. So we're going to be focusing on government censorship, how game designers give in to the desires of authoritarian governments just so they can have the money from the market. Talking of money, if you want to support us, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem for some exclusive content. Or if you want to give us a one-off donation, you can go to our PayPal and send it to us at wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. So, to business. Government censorship. What are your guys' knowledge and impressions of government censorship when it comes to video games?
Very little. I am... Well, you can hear me, can't you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. No. Good. Just checking in case I was still muted. Yeah, very little. I know very little about government censorship when it comes to video games specifically. The only pearls of wisdom I can bring to discussion today are I know that Australia is particularly strict on its classifications of video games, more strict than the UK. Because I remember there was quite a lot of controversy about GTA not being allowed basically in Australia at the time it came out. But beyond that, I'm afraid I am lacking in knowledge. I suspect most people probably aren't experts on the topic either, but I'm glad we're talking about it today because hopefully we can delve into it a little deeper. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm probably about the same. I don't know very much about censorship outside the UK. I did look into it a little bit within the UK. And for example, I knew that like one game had managed to get its age rating reduced because they switched from using red blood to blue blood. And so there's sort of weird rules about, as long as things don't look too realistic, then, that can shift where it goes on the rating scale. But yeah, other than that, I don't know very much. I'm assuming that countries like China and Russia and places like that, where they have quite a strict government that's very keen to control the narrative, I can imagine that those are the countries where a lot of censorship would be going on games that are coming in, especially from outside, from the US and Europe. But yep, don't know that much, hoping to learn something about it today.
Yeah, I think the stuff like cancel culture, I think, is a phenomenon born out of privilege, because the kind of they think it's censorship to have diversity, whereas censorship is when in China there are 180,000 blacklisted words that can't be used in media. That's cancel culture. And I think the difference, so I'll give you a couple of examples. So 180,000 blacklisted words on TikTok. They admitted that they were suppressing people who are disabled, LGBT community, and overweight. So it comes to, and you're not allowed to call there aren't any references allowed to Winnie the Pooh, because that's how people joke that Xi Jinping, the Prime Minister, looks like Winnie the Pooh. So they're not allowed to have that. And that's the stuff that matters. Whereas people in the Western world who think they're being oppressed, they don't have a fucking clue what it truly means. And it's a similar thing to anti-trans people, because trans women aren't a threat to cis women. They're just not. If every trans woman just disappeared off the face of the earth, women wouldn't be any percentage safer. But they create this threat because it makes them feel like they're victims, and it just completely fails to recognize genuine censorship. Because what I think the difference between age rating stuff, age rating is going, oh, you have to be a certain age to view this content, but you can view the content is allowed. Whereas I would argue with government censorship, the goal is erasure of certain kinds of people and content. So it's going in China, we don't want you to see fat people. We want you to not think. We want you to think that fat people just don't exist, or LGBT people just don't exist. It's just like the Ministry of Truth in 1984. So researching this really just puts in perspective people whining about cancel culture, because you can say anything. You have freedom of speech to say anything in countries like the UK and America. You can say anything without. And people might call you an arsehole, you might lose your job, you might all these other things, but it's nothing compared to these authoritarian governments. But so with that in mind, what role is there a healthy role that a government should play in censoring games? Muted.
I think censoring is perhaps the problematic word, because, well, no, we have a very negative relationship with the word censor and censorship. So, but let's say that put the negative relationship to one side and talk about censoring as the description of deciding what can and can't be seen by the public, and and I think that happens all the time in our lives. We censor ourselves when we're speaking. Censorship happens across the board. It happens in advertising when we say that we can't advertise alcoholic drinks or tobacco in certain scenarios, and we can't, I think it was last year or the year before where they changed the advertising rules to say that they shouldn't show women in derogatory roles or over-sexualized roles to deal with some of the sort of more misogynistic advertising. So I think there is some censorship that happens that is about society saying this is society's view of what is and isn't okay, and we're going to enforce that in the same way as we do with our laws and across the board. So I think that's one thing. So I think that's probably about as far as it should go, really. I think it should be I think the government's involvement should be very broad brushstrokes, and then within that, which is what we have in this country, we have another organisation who is responsible for deciding what rating films and TV shows get, and they are supposedly, and as far as I'm aware, are an independent body. So by doing it that way, you have a sort of, the government sets a basic broad idea of what we are and aren't going to accept, and then a a politically independent body is then responsible for looking at things like research on how do children react to violence, and is it, do we want this level of sexism or whatever in games, and I think that's basically as far as it should go. And then I would personally rather see a system of advisory than anything stronger than that. I like to know, if a game that I'm going to be playing with my daughter is going to be violent or have lots of swear words or whatever in, but then it's up to me, I think, as a parent, to then be able to say she is or isn't ready for that. But having an advisory age range and maybe not selling it to them, is, I think, is probably about as far as it should go.
Yeah, I'd agree there, Jem. I think one area where the government should and must be involved is safeguarding, particularly when it comes to online spaces and virtual reality spaces, and that needs to be in a way that is actually enforceable, so that things can actually be, followed up and taken care of, because quite a lot of this thing, it gets, reported and doesn't go any further. I know that the government have been working on an online safety bill. I'm not sure if it's actually been fully announced and set out as policy yet, but I know it was in the works.
It's been going on forever.
A couple of years. Yeah, and it really should be in action now. But that just shows the difficulty of it covers the internet as a whole in general, so that's a huge minefield in terms of safeguarding and safeguarding for vulnerable adults and children, because we have to consider vulnerable adults as well in gaming spaces and online spaces, and that is an area where the government has to be involved to make sure that things are followed through, because if it doesn't, it's just going to be some guidelines and recommendations, and it's not going to have enough teeth to actually protect and safeguard people properly, which is much like the Equality Act now. But it needs to be properly looked after by a government that cares about it. That's I think the one area where they definitely should be involved, even when you think about protecting and keeping gamers safe. But yeah, advisory definitely works as well in terms of age ratings and content advice. I think beyond that, like Jem said, there's probably not much of a need for the government to have its say over what we should and shouldn't be consuming as gamers.
Yeah, I think...
Sorry, go on, Matt.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say that the online safety bill came into force in October, or was given royal assent in October last year. So it's
okay. Quite recent.
Gone through its whole process. Yeah.
Good to know.
Royal fucking assent. That perfectly puts into fucking what I was about to say, which was fucking. So. And it's a thing where there are a lot of terrible things about our country and the way it's run, the power structure, people, everything. But compared to countries like China and Saudi Arabia, it's a different kind of bad. It's a different strata of bad. And so regardless of, there can be terrible things happening in our country and terrible things about the way our country is run. But we do have a level of privilege that is denied and suppressed by governments who are in charge of censoring things like this, which is why I think it's the responsibility of people with privilege to push the social progress as far as they can, so that countries like Saudi Arabia and China, for example, it's impossible to hide the social progress and the social the social progress of what we've got going on, because when people fighting against diversity, they go, oh, we just want it to be straight men again. And then Saudi Arabia can turn to its citizens and go, oh, look, only straight men are at the centre of everything. Everything's fine. So we have a responsibility to make it as diverse as possible. And we'll come on to in a moment about how game designers should react to government demands to be censured. I think probably trigger warnings is the optimal solution to any kind of media, because then you'll know what's inside it, and then you can choose whether or not accordingly. And a good example was, Alex, your Tomb Raider game that had a content warning at the start, which was what was it saying about Indigenous people?
That it contained offensive depictions of ethnic and like racial characteristics or something along those lines, basically saying that this is an old game and it's a bit racist, so this is not good, but we've decided to keep it in because we want to be true to the remaster, but we're hoping we can learn from it, was essentially the statement from the developers.
Jim Jeffries, a comedian, has a long joke about how the human race is on a train going down a track, and at the front you've got a couple of percent who are scientists who are driving the train forward with scientific progress, and then you've got people just living their normal lives, just supporting those scientists, so everything's going forward. And then you've got a couple of cars that are just lunatics who are just putting the brakes on as hard as they possibly can. And that's what cancel culture people are, just wanting to just be useless, deadweight, break-on arseholes. And there's it's so tricky, because if you say those people can't say what they want to say, but what they're saying is damaging to other people or offensive to other people, or so I don't know where I'm going with this.
It's a tricky thing, I think, when because you can end up going round in circles, can't you, with someone calling someone out and then saying, oh, well, you can't say that, and then it's kind of like, oh, but you're being a hypocrite, blah 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 blah. So it just kind of goes round in all these vicious circles, doesn't it? That's I think the tricky thing.
I'm
maybe
slightly changing my position on some of these things. Just the discussions about them, because I've been listening to forgotten his name, but it's Things Fell Apart. It's season 2
of that.
John.
Yeah.
John.
I can't remember his name.
Yeah, John. Anyway,
we're having a late this evening, but we'll get there.
And it's so interesting, because the first season, he was really talking about looking back through culture and how various things had happened that had caused kind of conflict. And in this season, he's talking more about a core of things that happened, actually, coincidentally, he said, in the first week of John Ronson, in the first week of in like 1 week in May in 2020, a whole bunch of things happened, and it's primarily sort of around linked to QAnon and conspiracy theories off the back of that, and COVID and all of those things. And one of the things that struck me is he did a story about a mother whose daughter had said during lockdown that she was a boy, and she wanted to be named, being given male pronouns, and she wanted to live as a boy. And the mother was actually like okay with this, like a little bit confused, but okay with it. And she went to the school and said to the school, please, I'm going to let you handle this however you see fit. But later down the line, she was told by her child that they had been in a meeting with the school where the school had sort of been saying things to them like, which toilets do you want to use? And, you know, do you want to do this and do you want to do that? And the mum felt really anxious about the fact that that this was all happening without her involvement. And the only reason she knew about it was because her child spoke to her about it. And the whole thing kind of spiraled out of control. And in the end, she was being used as a poster example and talking at sort of like DeSantis speeches and things like that as somebody, as an example of how, you know, her child had been forced by the school to transition, and everyone had made them be a boy and use male pronouns and use the male toilets and wear the male school uniform, and she was sort of like swept along by this. But the reality was that if at the start of it they had just been a little bit more engaged, whoever the school really, who was the one who was kind of like running with it, everyone was doing the right thing. Everyone in that scenario was doing the right thing. And it just really struck me that actually a lot of the basis for these fears are just lack of understanding, lack of awareness, lack of discussion, lack of lack of agency.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot that can be done to help that. I think the real problem is when you have authorities who are just trying to prop up their own power by keeping their population dumb, keeping their population under control and unaware of quite how bad things are. And that's a real problem. But I don't know how you tackle that as a creative agency. I don't know how you, I mean, you know, absolutely discussion has to happen. And as I just said, you know, like if where I'm sort of thinking about it, if it all has to be about good communication, then in those countries where there's strict censorship, then clearly that communication can't happen, or is going to be very fraught, very difficult to happen. And so, you know, that is a big problem for us.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't like John Rodson because he's too insightful. Every time I come across any of his work, I just go, "Oh, that's so true and so upsetting." Yeah, it's just I don't know where I stand in it, because I've been coming across a lot of people who are just detached from reality, and I think there's a significant portion of people that no amount of discussion will get them in touch with near reality, and you can't just make them shut up and make them not allowed to speak. But all you can do, all you can do is mitigate the amount of damage that they're able to do, and that's where stuff like the Equality Act and just diversity, we have a responsibility to, with all that noise, just keep on pushing it as far as we can get it to go, and just the amount of people I just see and go, how do you function? How some people function, and then there is also the people who get exploited for, because when you have someone who's detached from reality, somehow they can attach themselves to someone like Ron DeSantis and go, oh yes, I trust him, I'll do whatever he says. And there's no one more motivated than someone who's detached from reality for some reason. It doesn't, and it drives me mad the more I look at it. And John Watson doesn't help.
Yeah, it's so interesting when we talk about these sorts of things, because it's like when you think about the status quo and how the ones with power and authority are wanting to keep it a certain way in a certain structure, and like there's always been a hierarchy in all of human history since like the beginning of humans, basically. And of course, the ones with the most power are going to want to keep themselves at the top and everyone else lower down, and they'll feed whatever narratives fit that hierarchy. And I think when people don't know enough or they're afraid of things, like Jem said, it's because they're lacking awareness and knowledge, and they find comfort in people who are already going to back up those things that they feel they're comfortable with, because they're like, oh, well, this person agrees with me. I don't have to try and open my mind up and do some critical thinking. It's easier just to stay on this side and kind of roll with it. But yeah, it's just fascinating to think about, really.
We'll go on to the final part of what I want to talk about, which is so our friends Saudi Arabia have popped up again, who apparently he's a massive gamer is Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Apparently he loves video gaming, alongside when he's murdering dissident journalists and having them cut up by his fucking bodyguards. He has there's a $40 billion investment fund for video gaming in Saudi Arabia now, and they have bought investments in companies like EA, Nintendo, Activision Blizzard, and Capcom. So some of the biggest game companies in the world are going, oh yes, I want some of that tasty blood oil money. And so straight away, that's not even about taking a game and saying we want to release it there, censor this. They're going in right at the top and going, oh, we're going to be part of this. And I came across looking at the golf stuff that they've bought, and they have written into the contracts non-disparagement agreements, and this is fascinatingly worded. Each party agrees and covenants that it will not at any time, directly or indirectly, make, publish, or communicate to any person or entity or in any public forum any defamatory or disparaging remarks, comments, or statements concerning the other party, Saudi Arabia, their affiliates and ultimate beneficial owners, or their respective businesses, directors, employees, officers, shareholders, members, or advisors. Would you sign that? I don't think I'd sign that.
No. I just wonder how common it is for business agreements in general. I don't know. But yeah, that's pretty it's pretty clear, isn't it, that they don't want anyone speaking against them if they're involved in anything that they're giving money to.
So how should these game studios react when asked by a foreign government, you can't say these things if you want to have access to our market?
Well, I think they should just vote with their feet and move and leave. I mean, I do think that, and I've long thought that it makes. Well, I think Russia is a really good example, actually, because we engaged with Russia because we thought that by doing that, we wouldn't end up in the situation that we're in with Ukraine. And even after they'd annexed the Crimea, they were still sort of kept in, was still doing deals with them. Germany was, very much engaged with them. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so shocking for everyone, because the idea is that, if we share our cultures in that way, then they'll come around to our way of thinking. But the other way of looking at it is what I'm guessing Saudi Arabia is doing here is, if we infiltrate their cultures, then we get power over what they say about us when we do the things that they don't like. So, and the only way that you can tackle that, is to say, okay, well, I'm not going to play with you. We're not going to have you in our gang, because there is nothing else that we can do in that scenario, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it comes to just corruption. There are always going to be people with money who want to corrupt people. And just the sickening part is the people who take the money. And the way to fix corruption is for people to not take the money. Mm. And it's so disappointing over and over again. The people with the most already, the Djokovic's and the Nadals and the executives of these massive companies, they go, oh, can we just have a little bit more? Mm. And the price of it is just catastrophic and beyond. Every single time I read about Saudi Arabia, I see, oh, this interesting stuff they're doing and a little bit about human rights. Mm. When that's the point of all this non-disparagement stuff, is to make Saudi Arabia see, oh yeah, they're trying to make social progress and go out into the world, and they've got some flaws, but they're working on it. But then all you have to do is read one article on the Human Rights Watch website, and you go, oh yeah, it's a horrifying dystopian nightmare. Yeah. And they are bribing the world to hide this.
Yeah, that's exactly
washing over everything, not just sports washing. It's now into gaming, as you've mentioned, Matt. But yeah, pretty much everything really now. I think they've been making moves for much longer than we've been aware of, seemingly, if they're already in these positions now. Yeah. Scary thoughts.
Yeah, it's exhausting. I wish everyone would just fucking relax. Everyone just fucking relax. And we can just enjoy our games in peace. Okay, so I think we'll bring that episode to a close. That was an interesting conversation. Thank you everyone for watching or listening. We have content out every Thursday. If you want to support us, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem, or you can get stuff to us via PayPal to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. Until next time, bye-bye. We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.